Hello and welcome back to the Wasteland, everybody. Welcome back to Fallout 3, where today we're going to be taking a look at the hunting rifle and its unique variant, as well as we're going to be taking a look at the railway rifle as well, since that one doesn't really fit with any other weapon, and it would be kind of weird to have its own video since it is just kind of a one-off weapon. So the hunting rifle is probably going to be your very first rifle that you find, assuming you don't find an assault rifle right away. Not counting the BB gun, I guess. I guess technically that one is your first rifle overall, but the hunting rifle is your first real rifle that you're going to be finding across the wasteland. This is a very common weapon for pretty much everybody to have. It's really common for settlers to have this, hunters to have this. It's kind of the go-to weapon for them. Raiders have these all the time. Super mutants carry them a lot in the early game. So finding hunting rifles is not going to be super difficult overall for you. They also take probably the most common or second most common round in the wasteland, and that is the 32 round. That's pretty useful since it's only the 32 revolver and the hunting rifle that actually use that round. So there is no real competition there. The hunting rifle is just going to outdamage the 32 revolver. 32 revolver does have a higher rate of fire, and I believe it can do higher DPS overall, but it does do quite a bit less damage per shot. So the hunting rifle tends to be the better option out of the two. The hunting rifle is also a whole lot more accurate. They both hold the same amount of shots. They both have about the same reload speed. There's a lot of similarities between the two, which is a little bit strange. For the stats of the hunting rifle, this one does 25 damage per hit, which is pretty good, especially for the early game. And with you being able to fix these up, you're going to have pretty decent damage with them. This has 19 damage per second. The bolt action is a bit slow, so it takes a little while to fire that. That's okay though, because at least in the early game, these can do pretty well against most enemies, especially if you have some range. This has a 1x crit chance, so standard crits. 25 crit damage, same as regular damage. This costs 25 action points, which is fine. It's not super high, it's not super low. It's kind of the average for a lot of weapons like this. This has 0.3 spread, so it is quite accurate. It's one of the more accurate. I think it's actually one of the most accurate rifles in the game. This one and like the sniper rifle tend to be the most accurate. And as well as like Lincoln's repeater is quite accurate too, and the lever actions in general. Pretty much any of the manual action guns, with the exception of like the sniper rifle being a semi-auto. This one holds 5 rounds in the magazine, same as the revolver. This one only weighs 6 weight. It's actually not very heavy, so carrying around hunting rifles isn't going to weigh you down too much. And this one can shoot 667 shots before it breaks. That's pretty good. Makes it so its item HP actually goes a pretty decent ways, especially because this is a bolt action. You're not going to be firing those rounds super quick, so 600 rounds is perfectly fine. For the pros of the hunting rifle, super common ammo. You can find 32 rounds everywhere. Pretty much everybody has hunting rifles too, so that is really good. You can always fix these up. It is a pretty good early game weapon, although it will fall off later, but in the early game it's quite nice. And it has long range, which is good. So you can actually initiate fights from quite a ways away. Major cons are kind of what you would expect for this. It falls off later. Sniper rifles just outcompete the hunting rifle. They actually have a scope on them so you can more accurately aim them, and they just have higher stats overall. So once you start getting a whole lot of 308 rounds, you can just go to that. And since it is a bolt action, it does have a slow rate of fire, so follow-up shots aren't the fastest. Although if you're shooting at pretty long range, you should get in a couple shots before enemies are getting close to you to potentially attack you with melee. For an overall rating for the hunting rifle, I think I'd put this into B tier. It seems like a pretty solid weapon overall. It's better than average, and it tends to be one of the go-to weapons for quite a lot of people in the early to mid game. It is also good into the late game if you just want something to pick off stuff at a distance, pick off medium and weaker enemies. That way you don't have to worry about them as much, and 32 rounds are super common. This doesn't go through them very quick. So the hunting rifle is a decent overall rifle. Let's talk about the unique version, which is called Old Painless. Old Painless can be obtained if you go to the Republic of Dave, so you do have to go all the way to the very corner of the map, pretty much the furthest away part from where you start. And then you have to steal a key from Dave, and then you can open up his safe and steal this rifle. That's about the only way you're actually going to be getting this rifle, unless you're okay with killing Dave, in which case then you can take his key and open up the safe and get this too. So this one is going to be stolen regardless. But this gun is pretty interesting. This one does 30 damage per shot, which is higher than the regular one, so that's nice. Quite a bit faster rate of fire, as this one does 34 damage per second. This one does shoot noticeably faster. This still has the same 1x crit modifier, still does 30 damage with crits, which is good. Costs 23 action points, so slightly less, but not too much there. This one has a big old 0 for spread, so it is very accurate. It still can go off a little ways, similar to how like the lasers kind of work that way. And I'm not entirely certain why that is, but this gun is extremely accurate. This one holds 5 rounds, weighs 6, and this one has a little bit less item health, being able to fire 556 shots before it breaks. Still, that's perfectly fine. The old painless is actually one of the best weapons you can run and get right away, since 32s are all over the place and hunting rifles are all over the place. So if you just want to go and grab that, you're going to be set for pretty much the whole early to mid game and even to the late game until you want to swap this out for something else. So old painless is actually a pretty solid option, and I would bump it up a tier. I'd put this one up into A tier. It's solid enough. It still gets outcompeted by some of the sniper rifles, at least the unique ones. Gets outcompeted by a couple other rifles, but for the most part it is one of the better rifles in the game, especially if you just want something for general purpose or for walking around with. And even into the late game, it can be useful for just picking off smaller enemies. Let's move over to the railway rifle now, which this one's a little bit different because this is another schematic weapon, and you do need the schematics to get it. So once you have acquired a schematic for the railway rifle, then you need all the parts for it, and you can go and make this at a workbench. For the stats of the railway rifle, this one does 30 damage per shot, which is just as much as old painless, so that's actually pretty good. 60 damage per second. This one does shoot very fast, which is nice. It's got a good rate of fire. This one has a 3 times crit chance, so it is very likely to hit crits, which is really good. This one still does 30 crit damage, but you are more likely to hit those crits, so that is really good. This one costs 24 action points. Kind of weird that we got a gun that actually goes in between the hunting rifles, but okay on action points. This one has more spread than the hunting rifles at 0.75, so it's a little bit less consistent than them. It's still fairly accurate though. It's not one of the worst in terms of accuracy. The spikes also have travel time as well, similar to how like the dart gun has travel time. So you will need to be aiming this a little bit in front of enemies if you want to hit them, assuming that they're moving. If they're not, then you can kind of just aim directly at them and keep shooting, but it will take a second for your shots to actually register on them. This one holds 8 rounds in the magazine, which is pretty good. This one's using the railway spikes. It's the only weapon that uses that, so it's kind of got a monopoly on that particular weapon, or that particular ammo. And you can find those in tunnels and pretty much all over the Commonwealth. You usually find bundles of 20 of them, which is pretty nice. This one weighs 9, so it is fairly heavy, but not too bad overall. And this one does have low item health at 222, so it does break pretty fast. That's pretty much the only major problem I have with the railway rifle. There is also a unique effect that this one has on it though too, where it has a 3 times extra limb damage. So anytime you're shooting anything, you're more likely to cripple its limbs with this than others. You can also pin enemies to walls with it, which is kind of cool. And kind of a side note with this one in particular is that this one does seem to be one of the more buggy weapons, and it can cause crashes, or at least I've had more crashes with the railway rifle than I have using pretty much any other weapon. So it's a little bit weird in that regard, and that's why I don't tend to use this one very much, because I have used this one quite a bit, and it just seems to cause more crashes than other weapons. That could just be Fallout 3 being more janky. I imagine it probably has something to do with like the collision of the spikes and the actual spread, as well as the drop of the spikes as well. I would just assume that it's something like that. It also kind of makes a funny noise when you shoot it, doing a choo-choo sound, so that's kind of cool. As for a rating for the railway rifle, I'd probably put this thing up into A tier on the very high end. It's a really good weapon. You could argue it into S tier. Personally, I don't like how fast it breaks, and the fact that it causes crashes is what makes me put it like a tier lower than that. But if you haven't had the same crashing issues I have, especially if you have mods that fix a lot of those, then that probably won't be such an issue for you. And if you don't mind fixing this up with other railway rifles, getting people to fix it, or potentially just using your alien epoxy on it, then it could be a very, very strong weapon overall. So the railway rifle is actually quite solid. We should also talk about the schematics that you can find for this and how to actually build one of these. So there's 3 schematics for the railway rifle that you can get, although you can get a railway rifle from a unique encounter. There is a guy that actually has this. It's one of the few NPCs that carries one of the schematic weapons. The random encounters in Fallout 3 are truly random, to where they have set spawns where random encounters can take place, but it is random as to which encounter you get. So if you play 3 separate games of Fallout 3, you're probably not going to get the same random encounter at any of the locations that you got previous ones from. So you could find this guy really early on and take it off of him, or you could find this really later on and end up getting it there. That is the only railway rifle that you can actually just naturally find in the game as well. So it's similar to like the shish kebab, where that's Vance's weapon, and you can get it if you either steal it or kill Vance for it. But those are pretty much the exceptions to the unique weapons or the schematic weapons. There are only a few of them. Otherwise, you need to get the schematics, which you can get 3 of these. The first one you can buy from Tulip in the Underworld. This one's pretty easy because you're probably going to run there really early on. If you're doing the main story, it's right across the way from the Museum of Technology. You go over to the Museum of History and you can grab This as well, assuming you have enough money, you can grab this from Underworld, as well as you can grab all of the Lincoln gear, so you can get Lincoln's repeater, which is really good too. There's one in a substation on a workbench. This substation is MDPL 13 power station. This one's just kind of out in the middle of nowhere. You're probably going to be able to get this one pretty easy too, since part of the Wasteland Survival Guide quest does have you go pretty much right. You don't go right to this location, but you go very close to it. So finding it isn't going to be that difficult if you're willing to explore around like the trapped town. And then the last one that you get is from Abraham, Washington, which is a reward if you complete the quest Stealing Independence. This is where you have to go find the Declaration of Independence and either get that or get the forgery of it. Either way, and then bring it back to Abraham. He will give this as a reward. You can also get Sydney's submachine gun from this quest, or at least partially from this quest, as well as Riley's Ranger's quest, so you can actually get like 2 unique weapons there. This does make it so the railway rifle can be fairly easy obtained if you really want to go out and get it. And if you want to make a railway rifle, you're going to need 4 components, and these are all 4 pretty heavy components. You're going to need a crutch. This is the lightest at only 2. Crutches are fairly easy to find, and you generally find them in pairs, which does make sense. You can get the steam gauge assembly. This one is heavy. This one weighs 10. These ones you can usually find in the underground, so that's kind of nice whenever you're searching metros. Pressure cookers, which are some weight. They're not as heavy as some of the items, like the steam gauge assembly and the next one we're going to talk about. You usually find them all around houses and towns and stuff. Those ones are pretty easy to find. And then fission batteries are the last one. These ones are heavy too, because these ones also weigh 10, so you need to be carrying around a decent amount of weight just to make a railway rifle, which makes it a little bit awkward. I'm not going to lie, especially in the early game if you want to be rushing these, just because you have to pick up some heavy gear. You can, of course, get the house in Megaton and just hoard a bunch of stuff in there and you'll be good to go. But if you don't have that, and maybe you're going all the way to like Tenpenny Tower for the house, then it can take a little bit longer if you want to get this and be able to make it there. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Tell me what you'd like to see in the next one for Fallout 3, and I hope you guys enjoyed. I'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye, everybody.